Okay, this is A.SSE.3.a Algebra, Seeing Structure and Expression, Standard 3, Subpart A, Video 1, Factoring x squared plus bx plus c. All right, here's a term to know. Please copy this down in your journal and define it. And I grabbed this out of the textbook here. This is a key concept. It's got a lot of letters in there. Could get a little confusing as you're reading through it. So I think throughout this lesson, I'll be able to clear up what all of this says. So copy that down in your notes. All right, now we've talked a little bit about the FOIL method when we were in our last couple of lessons. And this is basically multiplying polynomials. It's a quick way of multiplying two binomials. FOIL, so you can see that first, outer, inner, and last. And I'm going to do an example that shows what the FOIL method, again, is all about. All right, like I said, this is dealing with multiplying two binomials. This only works with binomials. And I'm going to start labeling the set here. So if I'm looking at f for the first, that would be the first term in each binomial. So we have an f being the x, and then in the other binomial, the f is the other x. I'll do the outer and the inner last. Now the last. That would be the last term. So positive 3 would be the last term in the first binomial, and positive 1 is the last term in the second binomial. Now when it comes to this outer and inner, that would be, you know, I hate to put this on the video because Great America could change in the future, but there's a ride called the Batman ride, and it's a 4-seater. And you know, I tell the students in class that if this is the Batman ride right here, you've got 4 seats. You've got the seats on the outside, and then you've got the 2 seats that are on the inside. It's like a bench that goes across. So when I'm talking with the outer terms would relate as the x in the first binomial and the positive 1 in the second binomial. And the inner term would be the like the inside seats, which we have positive 3 in the first and positive x in the second. All right, so first, outer, inner, and last. Now, if I was not using the FOIL method and I was multiplying these like I had taught you with distributing twice, how is this answer going to look? I'll do it both ways. All right, the first way you learned was taking the first term, x, and multiplying it by the first term, which was x. And then we took the first term, x, and multiplied it by the last term, which was 1. And then we did it again in the binomial, the first binomial, we took 3, multiplied it by the x, and then we took the 3 again and multiplied it by the 1. All right, we ended up with x squared plus 1x. We had a plus 3x, and then we have a plus 3, and we combined like terms. And when we combined like terms, we had these two terms in the middle that we put together. Now when we're dealing with FOIL, right now, I would have f, I would have the o plus the I, the outer term plus the inner term, and then you would have the last term in the trinomial. So the final answer would come out to be x squared plus 4x plus 3. All right, so that is doing it, you know, using the distributive property twice. Now if I was going to quickly do the FOIL method, show you how that goes. It's kind of the same idea. So we have our first multiplied by the first. So we would have x times x. And then we would go with the outer. I'll use a different color here. The outer would be that x times 1. And then the inner would be that 3 times x. And then your last term would be that positive 3 times positive 1. And if you take a look at this, it is almost identical to what we were doing in that distributing twice process. So, you can just clean up the answers here. We've got x squared, we've got 1x, there's your outer, here's your inner, and then here's your last, and we're right back to what we were dealing with. Okay, so FOIL works just as well, and it only works with binomial times binomial. All right, so the reason I went through that is because we're going to get into this factoring method now, and it's basically working that FOIL in reverse. So we're going to be given a trinomial, and we have to create a product of two binomials out of it. So again, we'll be working in reverse. So I have a big X here. I'll do some examples that show what this X method is all about. All right, so here's our example. We have a trinomial. Our variable is to the second power. That's important. It's actually mandatory when we're creating these binomial products. And we need to figure out basically what was it before it became this trinomial. And as you go along with this, you're not even going to really need a process because you're going to become so good at it with your practice that it's just going to like jump right into your head. But if you need a process, I'm here to give it to you. So looking at the coefficient in front of the x squared, we have an invisible 1. Our last term is a positive 3, and this OI, remember we talked about the OI being the sum of your outer and inner terms. So there's kind of a lot going on here. The important factors are your coefficient, the signs of each of your middle term and your last term, and then this, I guess we could call it all of the factors of your last term. The factors of your last term are a big key in your success here. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to start with all of the factors of 3. So let's list those out. Factors of 3. Well, what multiplies together to get 3? Well, 1 and 3. And then obviously you could think of your signs. You could go with a -1 and a -3 because -1 times -3 is also a positive 3. And there aren't any other factors of 3. So noticing that we have this positive OI and this positive L in my answer, I'm going to have 2 positive signs sitting right in the middle of our binomials. All right, now if our last term has to be the product of our factors, I could put a 3 and a 1 right in there. Now if we're thinking of the first term having this coefficient of 1, 1x squared, I would need an x and an x. And if you want to FOIL that up, or if you want to use your distributive property twice, you'd come up with this trinomial. All right, so this is kind of how the book does it. They give you a little table in there, and they talk about the signs, and then they talk about these factors. Now the X method that I was discussing is going to come in more handy when we're dealing with coefficients in front here that are greater than 1, and when these last terms have factors more than 1 in itself. So more than prime numbers, you're going to start dealing with some composite numbers. All right, so this one will be pretty basic. An x can be created. My f and my L are pretty basic. The F deals with the coefficient. What are all of the combinations or factors of 1 that multiply together to get 1? Well, that would be 1 and 1. And then, you know, if you want to make another x with a -1, -1, you can, but I'll just tell you we don't need it for this case. And then we have this last term that multiplies together. So we have this 1 down here. This last term that we need a 3, a positive 3 out of it. So I can go +1 times +3 is equal to +3. Now this OI situation, I've got O and I, and what we're going to do here is a little cross multiplication. So we're going to take this 1 and multiply it by 3, and we're going to get a +3. And then we're going to take this +1 and multiply it by this +1, and we're going to get a +1. So when you put +3 and +1 together, you're going to get that +4. All right, now looking at the top, I have a 1 coefficient, that's true. I have a +4 middle term, and that's true. And I have a +3 last term, and that's true. So when I'm going to write out my answer now, all I need to do is take parentheses and group from left to right horizontally. Well, if my first term is 1, what am I dealing with? I'm dealing with 1x, working straight across horizontally, plus 1, multiplied by, well, 1 what? Another 1x, and horizontally I have my +3. All right, final answer is this product of the two binomials. That might have been a little confusing. I'm going to do another one here. Okay, using an x method, let's start with that. The coefficient in front of the y squared is a 1. So I'm going to have a 1 and a 1 that will multiply together straight down here to get me my 1. The last terms, I need a product of 18, and it needs to be a -18. And here's where it's going to start getting a little bit more tricky, because we have all these different signs now. We've got a couple negatives in here. So with these negatives, then I think it would be important to list all the factors of that 18 off to the side. So we have 1, 18, we have 2 and 9, and then 3 times 6. So all of these are possibilities with these x's. All right, so you can think of a chess game, think ahead. I know that I need a product of 18, and it's got to be negative, and then a sum of a 7, and that's going to have to be negative. So I already know that all of these on the right side multiply together to get an 18. Now, which one of these can also add together to get some kind of 7? So don't worry about negatives and positives yet. Just think about a sum to get me a 7. A sum is the opposite of a difference. So you're looking at adding or subtracting these numbers now to get that middle term. Well, 3 plus 6 is 9, and 6 minus 3 is 3, so that one's out. So that does not get me a 7. 1 plus 18 is 19, and 18 minus 1 is 17. That does not get me a 7. 2 plus 9 is 11. And 9 minus 2 is a 7. So we're going to be using a 2 and a 9 in some fashion. So using the x, I'm going to have a 2 and a 9. Now let's think about these signs here. Well, if I need a sum, if I need my O plus the I to equal a -7, and I have a 9 and a 2, which number needs to take hold of that negative sign when you're adding? Well, that would be the larger number. So negative 9 plus 2 would get our negative 7, and at the same time, positive 2 multiplied by negative 9 gets me that negative 18. So this is all working out very well for us. So how are we going to group that into our answer? Red's going to be tough to see, but yeah, I'll stick with the white. So the final answer is going to be a product of two binomials, and it's going to go straight across. So we have 1x plus 2 and 1x minus 9. Final answer, product of binomials. All right, let's try this one more time. I'm keeping with this coefficient of being 1. Later on, it's going to get more difficult. 32 has a lot of factors. So the factors of 32 are 1 and 32, 2 and 16. What do we have? 4 and 8. And I think that would be it for right now. That's it. Those are all the factors. So they all multiply together to get my last term. Now, which ones either add or subtract to get that middle term of an 18? Well, 1 plus 32 is 33, and then 32 minus 1 is 31. So that's out. That doesn't get me 18. How about the bottom one? 4 plus 8 is 12, and 8 minus 4 is 4. That does not get me 18. All right, so 2 plus 16 is 18. We found it. This is going to be, these are going to be the factors that we're going to use on our X tree. So let's take out our tree. And you don't even really need the tree anymore, I bet, but I'm just going to do it. So going straight down, we have a product of the first term, which would be the coefficient, which is a 1. So we have 1 times 1 is 1. The last term over here would have to be 32, and we knew that we're going to be using the 2 and the 16, and that's going to get me a 32. And the OI is going to be getting what? The product of the cross terms. 1 times 16 is 16, and 2 times 1 is 2. And when we OI these terms, OI means O plus I. We're putting them together. So a 16 and a 2 gets me an 18. Now let's look at these signs. Now it's sign time. Using the idea of negatives, the product is going to have to get me a positive 32, and the OI, the sum of these, are going to have to get me a negative 18. All right, so play around with the signs. We should know by now that a negative and a negative will multiply together to get a positive, and a negative added to another negative will keep my negative middle term. All right, so let's group this as a final answer. Right across here, horizontally, 1x minus 2 multiplied by 1x minus 16. Final answer, right here. Okay, in your journal, please define the given term on page 2 of the flip chart. Write down any sentences on what you learned. If anything was confusing, put that marking in your notes, and we'll talk about it when we all get back to class.